26 pens touched paper in the same second, and not one hand shook. Behind the signing table, a wall screen showed a single number, 6. It wasn't a clock. It wasn't a countdown to the ceremony. The ceremony was already happening. Nobody in the room explained what the 6 counted down to, and nobody asked. Admiral Serafina Vale stood at the edge of the hall and watched the ink dry. 18 months ago, the Galactic Concord had banished humanity into the dark beyond its charted borders. Today, 26 worlds stood inside that same dark and called it a capital. The room had no marble, no gold trim, no anthem playing under the moment. Just bare metal walls, honest about what they were, and a document that opened with one line: "The right to exist freely cannot be conditional." The Sarathi delegate signed forth, her 6 limbs folding with the careful patience of a species that did not trust quickly and did not forgive fast, either. The Orin delegate signed 6th, murmuring something in his own tongue that his translator rendered only as "finally." 3 of the signatures belonged to species that had voted to expel humanity in the first place. They had come anyway. Nobody in the hall mentioned that. Everybody in the hall knew it. Vale did not smile. She counted signatures instead, the way she'd once counted votes. 389 species had voted to cast humanity out. 23 had voted no. Now 26 stood in this hall, and the number didn't match either column, and that mismatch was the whole point. The number 6 on the wall dropped to 5 while she watched. "Admiral," Colonel Duke Reeves leaned close, voice pitched low enough not to carry. "Survey fleet still outbound. We don't know if they're headed here or to Outpost 3. "They're headed here," Vale said. "They just don't know it yet." The last delegate lifted his pen. You'd think a war ends with fire. This one was ending with ink, 26 signatures at a time, and Vale had 18 months of reasons to believe ink would be enough. 18 months earlier, there had been no hall. There had been a gallery, and 412 species seated in tiered rows, and a Concord high speaker reading a resolution in the flat, careful cadence of someone who had read 1,000 resolutions and felt none of them. "The Galactic Concord," the speaker said, "extends its mercy." That was the word, mercy. Vale sat in the 3rd row of the human delegation and did not move and did not speak. In 900 years, the Concord had never once expelled a member species. It had censured. It had sanctioned. It had never removed a seat from the chamber entirely, until today, when 389 hands rose to send humanity somewhere the Concord's maps stopped drawing lines. 23 species voted no. 0 abstained. Everyone else had an opinion, and the opinion, once tallied, sounded like applause. Vale let it wash over her. Cold water, not painful, clarifying. Beside her, High Coordinator Vethnor rose from the Concord's administrative box to formally read the terms into record. He was pale blue, scaled, taller than any human in the room, his cranial ridges holding a controlled, unreadable calm. 47 service ribbons crossed his formal robes. He tapped his 3rd finger against his thumb twice, a small, private tell, before he spoke. "Humanity will retain sovereign governance of Sol System and its established colonies," he said. "Concord trade access, technology exchange, and diplomatic representation are hereby suspended. This is not punishment. This is containment, offered as mercy, so that a young species may mature outside a framework it has proven unready to meet." Mercy. He used the word twice more before he sat down. Vale watched his hands rather than his face. The hands stayed still. That was the detail that told her the most. The transport home was Concord registered, impounded now, reprinted in a hurry, the old insignia still visible under 2 thin coats of grey if the light hit it right. Vale sat in the rear cabin with a folded flag in her lap, Concord blue, taken from the gallery wall on the way out, not stolen so much as claimed. Not a trophy. A reminder of what applause sounded like when it was aimed at your extinction. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, apologetic. "Course is logged wrong again, Admiral. Nav's showing us 63 light-years past any charted boundary. That can't be right. We haven't gone anywhere yet." "Leave it," Vale said. It's not wrong. She didn't explain that yet. Neither did the pilot ask twice. Reeves sat across from her, arms crossed, working a piece of ration bar with the grim focus of a man who'd spent 2 years inside an asteroid shelter and considered open cabin air a luxury upgrade. So, he said, we just got thrown out of the only civilization that mattered. They didn't throw us out of civilization, Vale said. They threw us out of their room. Those aren't the same thing. Feels the same from in here. It won't. She looked down at the folded flag. Not for long. The council chamber on Earth was smaller than the Concorde Gallery by a factor Vale didn't bother calculating. 30 seats instead of 400. No tears. No translation drones humming overhead. Just the council president at the head of a plain table and Dr. Emily Park at the far end with a data slate she hadn't looked up from since Vale walked in, and the low murmur of people trying to sound calmer than they were. Vale set the folded flag on the table in front of her, not as a display, just somewhere to put it down. They have done us a favor, she said. Nobody laughed. The council president's expression suggested he wanted to. Explain that, he said, before I decide whether to be angry with you. Vale didn't sit. For 900 years, the Concorde has defined what a civilization is allowed to become. Trade routes run through their relays. Technology exchange runs through their committees. Every species that wants a seat has to build the kind of ship, the kind of government, the kind of anything that fits inside a box the Concorde drew before we were born. We just got told we don't fit the box. She let that sit a second. I'm asking you to stop trying to fit. And do what instead? Build somewhere they haven't drawn a box yet. Building somewhere they haven't drawn a box yet. The council president studied Vale for a long moment, then looked past her to the colonel and the physicist and the folded flag sitting on the table like a closed door. You already have a target, he said. It wasn't a question. 63 light-years past the last Concorde relay buoy, Vale said. Unclaimed, uncharted. Ours if we're fast enough to reach it before anyone thinks to look. 6 hours of arguing followed. Vale didn't raise her voice once. By the time the vote came back, it wasn't close. The first ships left orbit at dawn, and there was no ceremony for that either, no crowd, no anthem, just the low bloom of drive flare against the dark and Reeves in the command deck muttering that liftoff still made his teeth ache. Colonists went first. Then hull segments, prefabricated and stacked like they were nothing, though each one would become a wall somebody's children grew up inside. Vale watched the tracking board until the last ship cleared the debris ring, then watched a second wave leave 3 weeks after that, and a third after that, none of them going to the same coordinates twice. You're not building a colony, Reeves said, watching the spread of the tracking board with something between admiration and unease. You're building a net. A colony can be found and cut off, Vale said. A net has to be found all at once or not at all. Park found her 3 months later in the drive lab, which smelled like ozone and cold coffee, and didn't bother with a greeting. I need you to sit down, Park said. I'll stand. Sit down anyway. It's polite to sit down for this. Vale didn't sit. Park ran the simulation instead, numbers scrolling past too fast for anyone without her training to follow, and then slowed it down to one line that stayed on the screen. 42 light-years a day. The Concorde's fastest courier ships do 15, Park said. We've been running this drive in secret testing for 6 weeks, and I kept rechecking the math because I didn't believe it either. It's not incremental. It's not an improvement on their model. She rubbed her eyes. It's a different model. We weren't refining their physics. We built something they don't have a name for. Vale looked at the number a long time. Somewhere behind her calm, something shifted, not triumph, not yet. Recognition. The kind of feeling you get when a door you'd assumed was load-bearing turns out to be furniture. Don't tell the council yet, Vale said. Why not? This is the whole plan working. Because right now it's a secret. The moment I say it out loud in a room with 30 people in it, it's a rumor. Rumors travel faster than ships. She finally sat, slow, deliberate, hands folded. Retrofit the exploration vessels first, not the warships, not yet. Retrofit them for what? I want you to find 23 specific coordinates, Vale said. The nay votes. The species that looked at 389 raised hands and didn't raise theirs. The Sarathi homeworld had rings, 3 of them, pale and thin, visible from orbit like scratches on dark glass, and no orbital defense grid powerful enough to have noticed a ship arriving 42 light years faster than anything they'd built the grid to detect. Vale's shuttle set down in an open agricultural field outside the capital because there was no embassy protocol to follow. Nobody had planned for a human ship to simply be there. The delegation that met her wasn't military. It was 3 elders, 6-limbed, compound eyes, catching the light in a way that made their attention hard to read, chitinous plating scarred in Patton's veil, would later learn were not injuries, but records. Each mark logged a kept promise. A Sarathi who trusted you carried the proof on their body. You are the expelled, the lead elder said, through a translator drone that hummed like an insect itself. Not an insult, a fact offered flat to see what Vale did with it. We are, Vale said. I haven't come to ask you to feel sorry about that. Then why have you come? Vale set a data crystal on the ground between them, not handed it over, set it down, the way you'd place an offering rather than a trade. The specifications for a drive that moves faster than anything the Concorde has ever built. I'm giving it to you. No treaty attached. No vote required. No committee has to approve you receiving it. The elder's compound eyes couldn't blink, but something in the angle of the head shifted. Nothing is free among the Concorde's members. I'm not a Concorde member, Vale said. Not anymore. What I want in exchange for nothing is for you to understand that humanity is not what they told you we were when they explained why they were putting us out. Silence stretched long enough that Reeves, watching from the shuttle ramp, shifted his weight twice. The elder finally reached down and lifted the crystal, turning it once in a 4-jointed hand. We voted against your expulsion, the elder said. 23 of us did. It changed nothing. The vote was already 389 to 23 before the tally finished. The outcome was decided the moment the resolution was drafted. A pause. We were curious what a species does with an unwanted gift like freedom. We're finding out too, Vale said. 7 species took the drive specifications in the months that followed, each contact quieter than the last, each ship arriving and departing before any Concorde relay had reason to log it. 3 of the 7 asked, cautiously, what came next, whether this was the opening move of an alliance, whether there would be a treaty, a summit, a name for what was happening between them. Not yet, Vale told each of them in turn, in words that varied but never in meaning. Give us 6 more months. When we ask you to sign something, I want it to already be true. I don't want a document that creates a relationship. I want one that describes a relationship that already exists. The Orin delegate, short, furred, patient in the specific way of a species that tracked alliances across generations rather than years, tilted her head at that answer and said only, "You are building trust the slow way. Most species build it the fast way, with paper first." Paper doesn't hold weight, Vale said. Trust does. I'd rather be slow and right. 900 years of institutional memory did not miss things easily, and eventually it didn't miss this. High Coordinator Vethnor noticed it first as a pattern in shipping manifests that shouldn't have existed. Sarathi trade vessels logging fuel consumption inconsistent with their filed routes. 3% here, 4 there. Numbers too small to trigger an automatic flag, but not too small for a man who had spent 9 centuries reading between the lines of other species' paperwork. He tapped his 3rd finger against his thumb twice, the way he did when a number refused to make sense. He ordered a formal audit. It came back clean. Every manifest matched every filed route, every discrepancy explained by weather delays and maintenance windows that individually made perfect sense. Collectively, they made no sense at all. Someone is teaching them to lie efficiently, Vethnor said to his aide, in the measured cadence he used for every observation, urgent or not. The lies are too small and too well distributed to be Sarathi work alone. The Sarathi have never needed to lie to us before. They didn't know how until now. His aide asked the obvious question, who taught them? Vethnor did not answer immediately. He was already keying in coordinates, not for another audit. For a survey fleet, 3 ships, unarmed by treaty definition, but fast enough to reach the edge of Sarathi space and beyond it, into the dark past the last charted relay, where his instruments told him nothing should exist, and his 400 years of pattern recognition told him something almost certainly did. Dispatch them quietly, he said. I don't want a resolution passed before I know what I'm asking the gallery to vote on. The survey fleet left Concord space 11 hours later, and it took the Sarathi intelligence network exactly 1 day less than that to tell Vale it had. The fleet had a destination, and Vale had 11 hours less warning than she wanted. Outpost 3, Reeves said, reading off the intercept data Park had pulled from the Sarathi relay. That's the closest one to Concord space. It's also the one with the newest colonists, weakest defenses, thinnest cover story if anyone starts asking hard questions. Then it's the one they were always going to find first, Vale said. Nothing wrong with their instincts, only their timing. She was already moving toward the comms station. I need the compact meeting moved up. 2 weeks, not 6 months. Park looked up sharply. Half the hall infrastructure isn't finished. We don't have seating for 20 species yet, let alone 26. Then people stand. Vale keyed the first outgoing message herself, 1 line, sent to 11 separate delegations at once. I want them to arrive at Outpost 3 and find the meeting already done, not in progress. Done. A completed fact is harder to argue with than a plan. 26 delegations. 11 days. Vale did not sleep in any of them the way people usually meant the word. She slept in chairs, in shuttle seats, once standing against a bulkhead for 4 minutes because Reeves told her later she'd been doing it and she hadn't noticed. The hall went up around her in pieces. Bare metal walls because there was no time to finish them any other way. A signing table built from cargo crates and a single slab of salvaged hull plating. Name placards printed the morning delegates were due to land. The Sarathi elder arrived first, 3 days early, and found Vale alone in the unfinished hall, running a hand along a wall seam that hadn't been welded flush. You are building this yourself, the elder observed. Not quite a question. I'm checking the seams, Vale said. If the wall's crooked, I'd rather know before 26 governments are standing next to it. That is not commander's work. It is if the commander wants it done right. She kept running her hand along the seam, unhurried, the trim on the far side genuinely still needing paint, and genuinely not the thing that mattered today. The trim can wait. The wall can't. The elder watched her a moment longer, something in the angle of the compound eyes that might have been the Sarathi version of a smile, and said nothing further. High Coordinator Vethnor received the survey fleet's first transmission from Outpost 3 in his private office, at an hour his aide would later describe, carefully, as inconvenient. He read it twice. He did not tap his finger against his thumb this time. His hand was entirely still, which his aide, watching from the doorway, unsure whether to speak, had never seen before. The transmission was short. Outpost 3's colony registry, population count, defense capacity, none of it hidden, none of it defended, all of it simply there, sitting in open broadcast range, as if humanity had never once considered the possibility of being found, and had nothing to fear from it. Attached to the registry was a second file, a guest list, 26 species, signatures pending, location, a station the Concord's charts did not contain. Vethnor's aide finally spoke. Sir, should I convene the Bureau? Not yet. Vethnor set the data slate down, precisely at the center of his desk, aligned with its edges the way he aligned everything. 900 years of institutional memory reached for a precedent and found none. No species had ever done this, not hidden, not fled, not begged reinstatement. built a second table, and invited the guests who mattered to sit at it instead. So, I said not yet. He looked at the guest list a while longer. 3 names on it belonged to species who had voted 18 months ago to expel humanity from the Concord entirely. I want to know how many of the 23 nay voters are on this list before I decide what I'm reporting upward. If it's all of them, this is a grievance. If it's more than the 23, he stopped. Sir, what would that mean? Vethnor did not answer right away. When he did, it was the first time in 11 years his aide had heard something in his measured cadence that wasn't entirely measured. It would mean the Concord did not lose 23 votes 18 months ago, he said. It would mean we have not yet finished losing them. The survey fleet commander, a junior officer named Bresh with orders that hadn't anticipated any of this, requested formal contact with Outpost 3's administrator. The reply came back within minutes, not evasive, not delayed, not the frightened stonewalling his briefing had prepared him for. Welcome. The administrator is currently off-site at a diplomatic function. All colony data is open for your review per standard transparency protocol. We have nothing to hide from you because we are no longer answerable to you. Bresh read it 3 times before forwarding it up the chain, and even then he wasn't sure standard transparency protocol was a phrase that had ever existed before someone typed it into that message an hour ago. The morning of the signing, Vale ate breakfast standing at the hall's east entrance, a ration bar she barely tasted, watching the first shuttles land in the field outside. Ordinary. Nothing about it felt like the center of 18 months of work. Just cold coffee, a stale bar, boots that needed relacing, the small unglamorous mechanics of a day that happened to also be historic. Reeves found her there. Delegates are seating themselves. Sarathi elders asking if the signing order matters. Alphabetical, Vale said, by species name in their own language. Nobody gets to feel like they sign last because we rank them. That's going to be a logistical headache. Good. Let the headache be about seating order, and not about anything that actually matters. She finished the ration bar, folded the wrapper twice out of habit, and set it in her jacket pocket rather than dropping it. Small, unconsidered. The kind of thing a person did without noticing they'd done it. The kind of thing nobody in the hall would remember seeing at all. Then she walked inside, and the room went quiet the way rooms do when the last person who matters finally arrives, and 26 pens touched paper in the same second, and not one hand shook. The pens lifted. 26 signatures dried on a document that began with a single sentence, and Vale stood at the edge of the hall the way she had stood at the edge of a gallery 18 months before. Except this time nobody was applauding, and this time the silence belonged to her. She watched the Sarathi elder set down her pen last, chitinous plating catching the light. One more mark added to a body that kept its promises in scars instead of paper. She watched the Orin delegate press, a small furred hand flat against the signature line, as if checking it was real. She watched 3 delegates from species that had voted 18 months ago to send humanity into the dark, signing anyway, standing in the room they'd once voted to keep humanity out of. Vale didn't speak. She looked at the room, at the 26 worlds that had come out of the dark to meet her, and nodded once, the way a commander acknowledges a mission complete. Bresh, the survey fleet commander, received Vale's automated message 4 hours after the signing concluded. It wasn't addressed to him personally. It was addressed to Outpost 3's entire incoming scan range, broadcast openly, in plain language, the way you'd post a notice rather than send a threat. This station is under the protection of the Free Worlds Compact, 26 member species, founding charter attached. Colonist population, defense readiness, and drive specifications are included for your review. We are not hiding. We were never hiding. We were building. Please forward this to High Coordinator Vethnor. Bresh forwarded it. He did not add commentary. There wasn't anything to add that the message hadn't already said better than he could. The Concord's reply took 6 weeks, which Vale had expected, and it arrived wrapped in the kind of careful bureaucratic language that took 4 paragraphs to say nothing. a formal review period, standard procedure, 6 months to properly assess the implications of the compact's formation before any decision could be made regarding the status of colonists still held in Concord custody. Vale read it once. Reeves, watching her face, said, "That's not an answer, that's a stall." "I know." She was already drafting the reply, and it was 3 sentences long. "The standard review period is not acceptable. The colonists come home in 30 days, or we make other arrangements. You can spend those 30 days reviewing the compact's roster, its drive specifications, or its defense readiness. I'd recommend all three." She sent it without softening a word. Vethnor read Vale's reply in the same office, at the same desk, and this time he did not align the data slate at its center. He set it down slightly crooked and let it stay that way, which his aide would later understand, though neither of them said it aloud, as the closest thing to defeat the High Coordinator's posture had ever shown. "Convene the Bureau," he said. "Full session. I want every faction present. To vote on a response. To vote on whether there is a response left to give." He looked at the crooked slate a moment longer, then straightened it, old habit reasserting itself even now. 900 years, and I have never once drafted a resolution that didn't assume we held every card. Draft one anyway. Draft the version where we don't. The Bureau session ran 11 hours. It produced no punishment, no sanction, no formal condemnation, because every option the Bureau considered required leverage the Concord no longer had. Humanity did not need Concord trade routes. The Compact had its own now, 26 deep. Humanity did not need Concord technology. The drive alone outpaced it by a factor nobody in the chamber wanted read into the record twice. The only leverage the Concord had ever truly held was the colonists themselves, and holding them past 30 days brought nothing but a compact response. Vethnor, for the first time in 9 centuries of institutional memory, could not confidently predict. The colonists were released in 19 days, not 30. Nobody in the Bureau wanted to find out what other arrangements meant. Vale stood on the receiving platform at Nexus Station when the transport arrived, the same kind of grey impounded vessel that had once carried her home from a gallery full of applause, and watched the doors open on 800 people who had spent 18 months not knowing if home still existed to return to. A little girl came down the ramp first, hand tight around a battered stuffed animal that had clearly survived worse than a year in custody. Blinking against open sky, she hadn't seen from a station window in longer than she'd probably admit to remembering clearly. Her mother followed, scanning the crowd, and stopped scanning the moment she found Vale's face, because Vale had made sure to stand where she could be found. "Is it true," the mother asked, voice rough, "that there's a whole alliance now, 26 worlds?" 26, Vale said, and more asking every week. She didn't add the number she'd projected to the council that morning, that within a year, if the current pace held, the compact would double the founding roster the Concord had spent 9 centuries building. Some numbers were better felt than said aloud on a landing platform to a woman still holding her daughter's hand like she didn't trust the ground to stay solid. The little girl looked up at Vale and asked, with the total honesty of someone too young to know the question was enormous, "Are we safe now?" Vale crouched down to her level. "You're not just safe," she said. "You're home. Those aren't the same thing either, but you get to have both now." That evening, alone in her quarters aboard Nexus Station, Vale opened the storage locker she hadn't touched in 18 months. The folded Concord flag was still there, blue fabric gone slightly grey with dust, exactly where she'd set it the night she'd claimed it from a gallery wall instead of stealing it, back when the difference between claiming and stealing had mattered more to her than it did now. She unfolded it once fully, for the first time since the transport ride home. Looked at it under the room's plain light. It was just fabric. It had always just been fabric. The meaning had never lived in the cloth. It had lived in the moment she'd stopped belonging to what the cloth represented, and that moment was long finished doing its work on her. In her jacket pocket, forgotten until her hand brushed it reaching for the locker door, was a ration bar wrapper folded twice, kept instead of dropped on the morning of the signing. She hadn't noticed doing it. She noticed now. Small things, kept without deciding to keep them, said more about a person than the things they chose on purpose. She folded the flag back along its old creases, precise, unhurried, and placed it in the locker one last time. Then she closed the door. The compact didn't need reminders of what it had survived. It needed builders who remembered why they'd built. Outside her window, the lights of 26 delegations' ships sat docked in loose formation against the dark, and somewhere past the edge of that light, more were already inbound. Vale stood at the window a while, watching the dark hold them all without swallowing any of it, and did not reach for the wrapper again.